right. I think we're live. Let's do this thing. Woo. Woo. All right. All right. So I normally have a format where let me record this. I normally have a format where I go over several topics regarding personal protection, fitness, leadership, men's issues. Today I'm going to take a moment to go over the topic that a lot of people are talking about, and that is the Will Smith slap on Chris Rock. And, I have my opinions on it, and I have my observations. And I want to glean some lessons from this for you guys, and hopefully we all find some value in this. First of all, the debate has been, one of the debates has been, was it staged or was it real? And in the beginning, I thought it was totally staged. But then as I do some more research, I don't believe it was. And I'll tell you why. The Chris Rock's reaction was pretty legit. Obviously, he saw Will coming up to him. And if you aren't familiar with what I'm talking about at the Oscars, which really hardly anybody even knew existed until the incident, so that's why people think it was staged. Chris Rock was presenting an award. I don't know which one. I don't watch award shows at all. Haven't for years. And he made a joke about Will Smith's wife, Jada Pinkett Smith, and the fact she has no hair, and she, talking about she should be in the next G.I. Jane. She suffers from alopecia, which basically causes patches of hair to fall out, and a lot of folks, when they have this, they just shave their heads a lot easier. Will Smith initially started laughing at the joke. It was not a big deal, and then he saw that his wife was very upset and got pissed off. Walked up on stage, approached Chris Rock, who thought he was probably going to say something to him because he's leading in as if he's going to, probably thought it'd be some kind of a, friendly sparring match, a little verbal sparring match because they're both comedians, and Will Smith slaps him relatively hard. It wasn't like a knockout blow or anything like that. And Will Smith goes back to his chair and says, keep, my wife's name out of your effing mouth, and basically acting a fool. And so let's get into this. One take on this, people are like, oh, how noble that he's defending his wife's honor, and he stood up for his family, and I guess I can see that point of view. It's pretty weak sauce, but we'll get into that in a minute. The other side is like, oh, he totally went unhinged and lost his cool. And I mean, if you've never watched one of these award shows, and I don't know if it's always been this way, probably has. Again, I haven't really watched a show in years. Is the presenters, they tend to kind of poke fun and roast some of the people in the audience, and it's kind of what they do. So, if you're at the show and people make fun of you, that's kind of be expected. For Will to react that way was completely out of decorum. Now, here's my take on this. Whether you believe it was staged or not is really irrelevant, because Will Smith has been in a position where he was completely and utterly publicly humiliated by his wife recently. A year or two ago. Now, to back up a little bit, Will and Smith have claimed to be Will and Jada have claimed to be in this open marriage thing. This shit doesn't work. Just saying. But from what I gather, again, I don't know. I'm not a Hollywood enthusiast, so I might be wrong on this. But from what I gather, she had a fling, an entanglement, she calls it, with her son's friends, so the young man's probably 20 years younger or more, with her son's friend. And Will didn't know about it until she tells him on national on TV in front of God and everybody. The only way that could have been more humiliating for him is if she had said, not only to have a fling with somebody, but your kids aren't yours. That would be the only way to make this more humiliating for him. And I bring this up because women and men, they cheat for different reasons, and they get upset about cheating for different reasons. And here's what I mean by this. If a man cheats on his wife, by cheating I mean they have an agreed set of parameters, monogamy or whatever, and they step outside that, and they have sexual relationships with other people outside the marriage. Men do it because we have this biological need to want to like sow our seeds wherever. Now it's a biological need, doesn't mean you have to follow it. You can certainly become anonymous. The challenge is that the higher status you have, the more money you have, the more fame you have, the more opportunities come your way to do this. And, women will literally throw themselves at you to become part of your your entourage and your notch count, if you will. So men cheat because they want sexual variety. A man can cheat on his wife and have literally no emotional investment whatsoever. In fact, they prefer not to have any. Although some guys get all crazy about the new girl. Now, so let me take a sidebar here. If you've ever been, I'll say this that's a whole other video. So anyway, so they get all nutty about it sometimes. But they'll go back to the wife and they'll still love the wife. And the love for the wife and the family really hasn't diminished. Now, if you do love your wife and your family and you are going to step outside, then it's incumbent upon you to not do anything to embarrass your family. And this is why it's very common in many cultures for politicians and high-level guys to have a wife and family and have mistresses openly. And there's, this has been going on for forever. It's just gone on since the beginning of time. So men will cheat on their wives because they want sexual variety. They want sexual access to more women. Okay. And women obviously will get upset about that. Not so much for the fact that the guy stepped out, because it threatens the security of the family. If a guy starts seeing another woman, there's a concern that his resources, his money, his time, his attention will be diverted from her and the children, if they have children, to a new source. And so the biological concern comes from the woman being worried about the fact that her family, her children with this man, and her home and her security are now being threatened by somebody else coming in and taking that away from the family. Yes, they don't want to be embarrassed. Yes, they don't want they don't want to feel like they're been replaced. But that's really the core of why it bothers a woman so much. And this is why many cultures, many women will look the other way. Basically, as long as the guy is taking care of stuff at home and he's paying the bills like he's supposed to, he takes care of the kids, a lot of women are either implicitly or explicitly okay with it. The Clintons. Anyway, now, if a woman cheats on a man, it's very different. As much as, the new wave order of social justice warriors want to argue, it's very different. And the reason is this. Well, one of the reasons is when a man is involved with a woman in a committed relationship. I want to say monogamous. That's a committed. One of the concerns biologically is that he might end up raising children that are not biologically his. So if his woman, his wife, cheats on him or has sexual relationships outside the marriage, if you will, then there comes a chance that any children that come about that may not be his, and he'll spend his time and money and resources raising children that aren't biologically his, unknowingly. That's a key element. Now, if you knowingly take in a child, that's a different story. Now, even though I don't think Jada Pinkett Smith is going to be knocked up anytime soon, I'm sure, but that doesn't change the biological, innate hardwiring that we have about that. So, when a woman steps out on her man, it's deeply humiliating to the man, because it basically says that she's so dissatisfied with you that she's willing to go outside and possibly become pregnant by the guy and yet expect you to take care of it. There's terms for this. We'll get into that. So I want to make that clear. So it's not the same if a guy cheats on a woman. If you're in a committed relationship and you agree that you shouldn't do that, that you're going to be one person, then you should be with one person. That's the deal. If you are going to be in a relationship and you're like, hey, you know what, I need more than one woman, then you should probably set those parameters in the beginning. And there's ways to do that without being a total a-hole. But regardless, let's say you're in a marriage, you agree to be one person, yada, yada, yada. So neither one of them should stray from that if that's the agreement. Okay, it's a contract. It's a social contract. The government enforced, which, whatever, that's a whole other thing. So Will Smith, in this case, has been deeply humiliated. He's lost a ton of status with males, with men. And we talked about this in another video where um, it's not just enough to, if you want to, score with ladies, it's not just enough where you are attractive to women. Maybe you're good looking, maybe you have money, maybe you're famous, but to really to have status, you also need to be looked at well and respected among other men. Not doing that will lower your status as a social, and your social status. Excuse me. And there's a lot of people who have the phrase I heard someone say not too long ago was like, everybody likes Will Smith, but most people don't respect him, and it's coming from men because of the situation with his wife and her entanglement, which is a pretty creative way to say fling or affair. So him reacting this way, the problem it causes for guys, he did not regain for most men, he did not regain any status by assaulting Chris Rock, who's a comedian doing his damn job. And I believe they're friends. I don't think they're even strangers. So because he's defending the honor, so he thinks, of a woman who has publicly disgraced him, who doesn't have honor as a wife. Now, doesn't mean she's a bad person. Doesn't mean she has other qualities that aren't amazing. But as a wife, I would say she failed pretty spectacularly. So to defend his wife's honor over a joke that wasn't even that bad by assaulting another person who did nothing wrong makes him look really weak. And I believe, and many people do too, that Will is so damaged by this humiliation that he needs therapy. I mean, it really, many people who have never been through something like this, who've never had a woman cheat on them. And again, I can't imagine. So I've had this happen to me. I've had a woman cheat on me, and then make fun of me for how easy it was and all that kind of stuff. So that I've had this in my past, but I'm not a movie star, and it wasn't done on national television in front of millions of people. So as much as it was hurtful to me to have someone cheat on me, I really can't imagine what it'd be like to have his profile and status and have his wife come on TV and not even tell the world that she cheated on him, but make it sound like it wasn't a big deal and it was almost his fault. That I can't imagine the emotional trauma that Will must be going through. So it's not too much of a stretch to understand why he would react in such an inappropriate way. I get it, So I don't hate Will Smith for this, and I don't think anybody else should. I think he needs to get in a situation where he's not trying to save something that's not savable. In this case, this is his marriage. I mean, I don't know if she's ever really come out and really apologized. Again, they had a deal. The deal was they can see other people, blah blah blah, and that's not good. It sounds good on paper, but it doesn't work in real life. So, what are the lessons we can learn from this? Okay, because it's really what I want to do. I want to just everybody else talk about Will and how what a big deal it was. I want to be able to glean some lessons from this and have us all become smarter, more capable men. Lesson number one. One lesson, I wouldn't say that the first one, but one for sure is if your woman cheats on you and you're in whether it's monogamous or open or not, you need to get rid of that. You need to move on. Because again, as I explained before, the reason women and men cheat are for different reasons. If a woman's leaving, if a woman even thinks about cheating on you and leaving you, you're pretty much already done with the relationship. And maybe because you didn't do your job as a man. Maybe you weren't providing. Maybe you weren't protecting. Maybe she didn't feel secure in the relationship. Maybe you have a gambling problem. Maybe you have a drinking problem. Maybe you repeatedly step outside the marriage when you agreed you wouldn't. I mean, I'm not saying women have no reason to cheat. There's plenty of reasons. But, if you have a woman who would publicly humiliate you about cheating on you, and then you want to stay with someone like that, that's a big problem. So that's lesson number one. Lesson number two. If you have strong emotions and you're hurt or angry, which happens, make sure you direct your actions in a way that's going to solve the problems with that person. Chris Rock did nothing wrong, and the irony is again, this event happened when almost nobody's watching, so now it's a big deal. So it might actually benefit him in the long run because now people are talking about him and blah blah blah. But if you have emotional trauma and you're hurt, angry, don't. And it's hard to say. I know it's a hard thing for some guys. Don't react in a physically violent fashion. You are a grown man. I'm assuming for this, or you're hopefully going to be a grown man, and you're capable of hurting other people. Especially if they're your family or your friends. You're capable of hurting yourself, and there's really no need for that. There's no need for physical damage to happen to you or anybody else because you have emotional trauma. There's nothing wrong with seeking therapy when you're this hurt. And again, I have had someone cheat on me, and it really really hurt. I can't imagine the level of pain that Will Smith must be going through, the way this all went down for him. So I have no doubt that he's trying to handle a lot of emotion, a lot of anger, and it's only not completely unexpected that it manifests itself in an unhealthy fashion. So that's lesson number 2. If you have trauma, don't go and cry to your wife or girlfriend. That's not going to be helpful. Go find a guy friend. If that doesn't solve the problem, find a therapist that works with men. Find a therapist that works with men, not couples, not women. And I shouldn't be too harsh to the but the way our social order is skewed, it's all about what benefits the women by and large. Woman divorces, which they file 70 to 80% of the divorces. It's their choice. Child support set up that way. Family law set up that way. And there's nothing wrong with taking care of your kids and but it's just set up for women because women being a little more vulnerable. The old order thinking is like, oh well, they can't get jobs and they're all on their own if a guy is not there. So most of these institutions are set up to benefit women, and there's nothing really wrong with that per se, except that the benefit of women often comes at the expense of men, and that's where the problem comes in. So find a therapist that helps men and has a track record of helping men, not helping men become more feminine and sensitive, but helping men handle the trauma, handle the emotional, damage of having something like this happen. Whether and it could be loss of a loved one, it could be a problem with your children, but in this case, for sure. So lesson number 2 is don't react in a physically violent fashion because you have emotional pain. Easier said than done, but it's important. As a grown man in civilized society, you need to handle this stuff in a way that's not going to hurt people around you that you care about. Okay, what's another lesson to learn this? Well, God, there's so many, so we have lesson number 1: get toxic females out of your life the best way you possibly can. Lesson number 2 is don't react violently because you have an emotional trauma. Lesson number 3 is, make sure that when you get into a relationship, you clearly understand the consequences of the boundaries you set. And I talked about this a few minutes ago. Is like there's open stuff doesn't work for guys, and that sounds unfair, because so basically look at the human culture. There are plenty of places in the world where men can have multiple wives. They're also obligated to take care of the wives in a relatively equal fashion. You can't have, well, I guess you can, but you aren't supposed to have like one wife where you are just lavish money and attention on it, and you have 2 other wives living in tents. You're supposed to take care of your wives equally. So if you have the financial resources to do that, and the kids aren't being neglected, and the women don't feel like they're in lack of their security to be taken away, that works. But there's really no place where it works where a woman is going to have meaningful relationship with other men, multiple men, and have that be successful. So that's lesson number 3: is understand when you're in a relationship what the boundaries that you set, what the consequences will be. And if you agree that you are not going to see anybody else and it's just going to be you and this woman, then you should abide by that contract. And if you feel like you cannot, then you either renegotiate the contract or you dissolve the contract. And there's penalties for that, especially if there's children involved. So I'm going to leave it at that because this has been talked to death. I'm not going to make fun of Will. I'm not going to make fun of Chris. I'm not going to make fun of Jada. I would tell you that if a woman in my life humiliated me this way, she would not be a woman in my life. But I wouldn't violently assault her, and I wouldn't break furniture. That's not what men do. We solve problems, not create. The idea of being a grown man is when a problem comes your way, you solve it in the most expeditious, efficient way possible, not solve it in a way that creates more problems. That's not smart. So, but I will tell you, when you have when you're emotionally hurt for lots of reasons, we talked about this in another video, is do not go to your female counterpart and blabber to her about how hurt you are and how sad you are, because that's going to make her think that her security is gone. And rightly so. Talk to your guy friends. If your guy friends can't handle it, guys, get a therapist that specializes in helping men solve men's problems. Not one that helps women solve their problems, or couples solve their problems. I guess if you're going to a couple, it's different. But it's everything is definitely skewed to like being good for women. And again, I'm all for that, as long as being good for women is also good for men. But oftentimes, being good for women comes at the expense of being good for men. It needs to be, work on both sides, and both sides are different. They're different. All right, guys, hope that makes sense. If you found some value in that, I appreciate you hanging out with me on this Thursday morning, and I will catch you all very, very soon.